The sky over Arkhaven burned red with the fading light of a dying sun. Captain Elias Rourke adjusted the scope on his battered rifle, scanning the ruins ahead. Wind howled through the skeletal remains of once great skyscrapers, carrying the scent of rust, ash, and death. The city had been a jewel of the Terran Dominion before the Excelvok burned it to the ground. Rourke crouched behind a crumbling concrete barrier, motioning for his squad to halt. They were 6 in total, what remained of the 22nd Dominion Rangers. Warriors without a war, ghosts clinging to a broken past. Beside him, Lieutenant Adrian Cole wiped sweat from his brow. Another empty husk, Cole muttered, eyes scanning the ruins. No food, no weapons, just more reminders that we lost. Rourke ignored him. A faint blinking light on his wrist display caught his attention. The signal had started an hour ago, an old Dominion frequency, long thought dead. He checked it again. It was still transmitting. "This isn't a random signal," Rourke said, voice low. "Somebody's alive out there. Somebody who still believes." "Or it's a trap," said Nora Vex, the team's sniper. She tapped the worn barrel of her rifle against the ground. Excelvok still patrol these ruins. Could be bait. Rourke considered that. The Excelvok were ruthless, but they weren't subtle. If they wanted survivors dead, they'd just bomb the ruins from orbit. No, this was something else. "We move," he ordered. "Double time." The squad wove through the shattered remains of Arkhaven, their footfalls silent against the dust-covered streets. Wrecked vehicles lined the roads, rusting relics of a world that had fallen in a single day. Rourke had been here when the sky cracked open and the Excelvok came pouring through. Hulking war beasts clad in biometal armor, their weapons tearing through Dominion defenses like paper. He clenched his jaw and pushed the memory away. They reached the source of the signal, an old Dominion outpost buried beneath a collapsed overpass. The doors, reinforced titanium, were still intact. A security console flickered weakly, struggling against decades of decay. Rourke placed a gloved hand on it, and the system came to life with a crackling hum. The blast doors rumbled open, revealing a passageway lined with Dominion banners. The air was stale, thick with the scent of oil and metal. Rourke took a cautious step forward, his rifle raised. Then he heard it, a voice, mechanical yet human, echoing through the chamber. "Welcome, Captain Rourke. We have been waiting for you." Rourke's breath caught in his chest. The others tensed. In the darkness ahead, lights flickered to life, illuminating the silhouettes of massive cryopods, rows of them stretching deep into the shadows. And inside each one, soldiers, Dominion warriors, frozen, waiting. Rourke exhaled, gripping his rifle tighter. The Dominion wasn't dead. Not yet. The silence was deafening. Dust swirled through the air as Rourke stepped forward, his boots echoing against the cold metal floor. The Dominion soldiers inside the cryopods looked almost peaceful, faces locked in a frozen slumber, their armor pristine despite the years. The Dominion hadn't just fallen. It had prepared for resurrection. Cole whistled under his breath. "We spent years thinking we were the last ones left. And now..." Nora Vex tapped the side of a cryopod, watching frost crack and flake away. What the hell happened here? Rourke turned his attention to the control console near the entrance, its dim screen pulsing with long-dormant energy. He brushed away a layer of dust and accessed the logs. The system responded sluggishly, but after a moment, lines of text scrolled across the screen. Project TREVNANT. Status STNDVY. Last system Shayheki. 22 years ago. Awaiting reactivation protocol. Rourke's heart pounded. This was no ordinary outpost. It was a contingency plan, a failsafe. Someone had placed these warriors here, waiting for the right moment to rise again. But before he could process what it meant, A sharp, high-pitched ping rang out from his wrist display. Movement. Not from the pods. From outside. Contact. Rourke whispered. The squad took defensive positions, weapons aimed at the entrance. The motion sensor flickered. 5 signatures, moving fast. Too fast. Then the walls trembled with the sound of impact. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the chamber, distorted by the Dominion intercom system. Terran vermin, you are from your holiest to die. Zelvok. The doors blew inward in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. Smoke filled the room as figures emerged, hulking, armored warriors with razor-sharp exoskeletons. Their glowing red eyes locked onto the squad, and in an instant, the ambush began. Rourke dove behind a console as plasma fire erupted around them. Cole returned fire, his rifle round sparking against Selvok armor. Vex dropped one of the creatures with a clean shot to the head, but the others kept advancing, their movements unnervingly fast. Rourke's mind raced. They were pinned, outnumbered, and backed into a room full of frozen soldiers who couldn't fight. They needed a way out. Fast. Then he saw it. The reactivation command. He slammed his palm against the control panel. The system hesitated. Then a mechanical voice boomed through the chamber. Project REVNANT. Activating. A deafening hiss filled the room as the cryopods unsealed. Steam poured from the openings as metal restraints snapped free. Then the warriors stepped forward. They moved with inhuman precision, their bodies enhanced with cybernetic augmentation. Eyes glowing with power, they scanned the battlefield. Then, without hesitation, they attacked. The Dominion had risen, and the Xelvok had just made a terrible mistake. The Xelvok warriors hesitated. It was only for a second, a flicker of confusion as the cryopods cracked open. But in battle, a second was an eternity, and it was all the revenants needed. The first of them lunged forward with unnatural speed, slamming into the nearest Xelvok like a battering ram. The alien's armor crumpled with a sickening crunch, its body thrown across the room like a ragdoll. Before the others could react, more revenants emerged, their cybernetic limbs moving with perfect efficiency. Gunfire erupted. Plasma bolts from the Xelvok found their marks, but the revenants shrugged them off, their advanced armor dispersing the energy. One of them, a towering figure with a reinforced exosuit, ripped the arm from an enemy warrior and used it to bludgeon another. Rourke watched in stunned silence for half a second before snapping into action. Push forward. His squad surged into the fight. Vex dropped to one knee, picking off targets with precise headshots. Cole tossed an ion grenade, sending 2 Xelvok crashing into a wall in a burst of crackling energy. The Xelvok had expected an easy extermination. Instead, they were being torn apart. Rourke ducked behind cover, reloading his rifle. His eyes locked onto the leader of the Xelvok squad, a towering brute clad in ceremonial warplate, its elongated skull marked with blood-red sigils. Unlike the others, this one didn't flinch. The warlord raised a clawed hand, and the gauntlet on its wrist pulsed with alien energy. A shockwave erupted, sending debris flying and knocking one of the revenants back. The Xelvok leader roared, activating a blade of searing plasma and charging straight at Rourke. Rourke barely had time to react. He rolled aside as the blade carved into the floor where he'd stood a second ago. He fired point-blank at the warlord's head, but the alien twisted, avoiding the shot with unnatural grace. The Xelvok moved too fast. Rourke was outmatched. Then a blur of motion intercepted the warlord, a revenant. The soldier hit the Xelvok leader like a missile, driving it back with sheer force. Up close, Rourke saw the revenant's face, a woman, her features sharp and intense, eyes glowing with an eerie golden light. Her armor bore insignias of a Dominion elite unit he hadn't seen in decades. She didn't hesitate. The warlord swung its plasma blade, but the revenant caught its wrist mid-strike, twisting with bone-snapping force. With her free hand, she drove a combat knife into the alien's throat. The Selvok gurgled, staggered, then collapsed. Silence fell over the battlefield. The remaining Selvok, seeing their leader dead and the revenants standing tall, turned and fled into the ruins. None would escape alive. The revenant woman turned to Rourke, her glowing gaze locking onto him like a targeting system. "You activated us," she said. Her voice was calm, controlled, dangerous. Rourke exhaled, lowering his rifle. "Yeah, looked like we needed you." She studied him for a moment before nodding. "Then let's hope you're worth it." Her eyes flicked to the ruined Dominion banners on the walls. "Because if the Dominion is to rise again, we have a war to finish." Rourke studied the woman standing before him. She was more than human. Stronger, faster, deadlier. The Revenants had been legends in the Dominion's final days, the pinnacle of Terran military engineering. But legends didn't bleed. Legends didn't wake up after 20 years in cryosleep and pick up a war they had already lost. Yet here they were. "You got a name?" Rourke asked. The Revenant wiped the blood from her combat knife before sliding it back into a sheath on her armor. "Commander Celine Voss, Dominion Special Forces." Her eyes flickered with artificial light, as if scanning him for threats. "You're not high command." "No one is anymore," Rourke said flatly. The Dominion fell. Voss didn't react. She turned, surveying the ruined outpost, the shattered walls, the faded banners. When she finally spoke, her voice was cold, measured. "Then we rebuild." The survivors gathered in the control room, where old Dominion maps flickered weakly on a dusty holodeck. The Revenants, now fully conscious and aware of their circumstances, stood apart from Rourke's squad, watching, analyzing, silent. There was a distance between them, an invisible barrier built by time and purpose. Rourke ignored it. They had a war to plan. "The Exelvok aren't going to ignore what happened here," he said, gesturing to the fallen warlord. "We just sent them a message. The problem is, we don't have the firepower to back it up." Voss leaned forward, tapping a point on the holomap. "There's a solution to that. Before the war ended, the Dominion stockpiled advanced weaponry in secure vaults across our core worlds. We were meant to rearm before launching a final counteroffensive." Her jaw tightened. That counteroffensive never came. Rourke frowned. "You're talking about black site armories." "Exactly," Voss said. "One of the largest was hidden in an asteroid facility deep in the Obsidian Belt. It contains prototype power armor, high-yield rail rifles, and Dominion war drones. If we take that armory, we'll be more than just survivors." "We'll be an army," Cole muttered. Rourke nodded. "Then that's our next move. We take the Obsidian Vault." The Ironclad was an old Dominion warship, scared, half-functional, but still deadly. As the crew powered up its engines, Rourke stood on the bridge, watching Arkhaven shrink behind them. For years, that ruined city had been a tomb. Now, it was just a memory. Voss stepped beside him, arms crossed. "I don't trust you yet," she said bluntly. Rourke smirked. "Fair. You say the Dominion is gone." She continued, watching the stars blur as the ship entered FTL. "But we were made for war. We don't stop. We don't surrender. So tell me, Captain." She turned to him, golden eyes unblinking. "Are you here to survive, or are you here to win?" Rourke met her gaze. "We rise," he said, "and we don't stop until the galaxy knows what it means to fear us again." The Dominion was coming back, and this time, they wouldn't fall. The Ironclad tore through the black void of space, streaking toward the Obsidian Belt. Outside the viewport, thousands of asteroids drifted like frozen wreckage, shrouded in thick clouds of ionized dust. Somewhere within that labyrinth of rock and debris lay the Dominion's hidden war vault, untouched for decades. Rourke stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Scan for any active signals. If the Selvok got here first, we need to know." "Already on it," Cole muttered, fingers dancing over the console. "Picking up faint energy readings. Could be residual power from the vault, or a trap. Voss, standing nearby, barely glanced at the readings. If the HFY are here, we kill them. Simple. Rourke almost smiled. The revenants weren't ones for cautious planning. They were weapons, forged for battle. And right now, battle was exactly what they needed. As the ship drifted closer, the vault came into view, hidden within the shadow of a massive asteroid. The facility was still intact, its reinforced hull gleaming under the dim light of a distant star. But something was wrong. The main doors are already open, Vex reported, peering through her sniper scope. Somebody's been here. Rourke felt his stomach tighten. Then let's find out who. Inside the vault, the air was stale with the scent of rust and old power cells. The team moved cautiously through the dim corridors, rifles raised, boots silent on the metal floor. It didn't take long to find the first bodies. Scattered Dominion war drones lay in pieces, their armor punctured by plasma burns. Zelvok corpses were sprawled across the floor, their weapons still clutched in clawed hands. Whatever had happened here, it had been a massacre. Someone beat us to the fight, Vex murmured, nudging a fallen Zelvok with her boot. Then a voice crackled over the comms. Identify yourselves. Rourke's rifle snapped up. Who the hell is this? A figure emerged from the shadows, clad in scavenged Dominion armor. Others followed. Humans, battle-worn and scarred, their weapons trained on Rourke's team. At their head stood a man with a cybernetic eye, and an old Dominion captain's insignia burned into his shoulder plate. Didn't think I'd see another Dominion ship in my lifetime, the man said, lowering his weapon. Name's Darius Kane. We're what's left of the Terran resistance. Rourke exchanged a glance with Voss. How many of you are there? Rourke asked. Kane smirked. More than the HFY would like. Behind him, doors slid open, revealing hundreds of soldiers, ragged but armed, desperate but determined. Survivors who had never given up the fight. Voss stepped forward, scanning the gathered warriors. Then she turned to Rourke. We came for weapons, she said. Looks like we found an army. Rourke exhaled, gripping his rifle. The Dominion rises today. The war vault wasn't just a stockpile of weapons. It was a relic of humanity's past, filled with the ghosts of a fallen empire. Rows of high-yield rail rifles, experimental power armor, and dormant combat drones stretched into the darkness. The Dominion had prepared for a last stand, but the battle had ended before they could use their arsenal. Now, Rourke intended to finish what they started. Darius Kane led them through the armory, past soldiers who eyed the revenants with a mix of awe and unease. We've been fighting in the dark for 2 decades, Kane said. Scattered cells, sabotage missions, hit and run strikes. We've hurt the HFY, but never enough. They still think of us as vermin. Then let's change that, Rourke said, running his fingers over a crate of plasma charges. You said there were more of you. How many resistance cells are still active? Maybe 20, Kane admitted. Some are barely holding on. Others are strong. If we can prove we're more than just scavengers, they'll rally. Voss, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Then we don't waste time. We take the fight to the enemy. Kane hesitated. Easier said than done. The HFY just deployed something new. A high-priority target has been leading their extermination efforts against human survivors. Rourke frowned. Who? Kane exhaled, as if bracing himself for what he was about to say. General Conrad Hale. The room went dead silent. That's impossible, Cole said, shaking his head. Hale died when the Dominion fell. He should have, Kane said grimly. But the HFY captured him instead. And now, they've turned him into one of them. Voss's expression hardened, her golden eyes flickering with something unreadable. Explain. Kane pulled up a holoprojector, displaying a grainy, intercepted transmission. The image showed a towering figure clad in dark biometal armor, its once human face partially obscured by cybernetic implants. Its eyes glowed with the same crimson light as the HFY. But despite the monstrous enhancements, there was no mistaking him. Conrad Hale, the man who had once led the Dominion's forces, the man who had sworn humanity would never kneel. Now he stood beside the enemy. Rourke clenched his fists. "Where is he?" "Commanding the Selvok fleet," Kane said. "They've been hunting resistance groups for years. If we take him down, we cripple their leadership." Voss's voice was cold. "Then we kill him." But Rourke hesitated. Something about the image unsettled him. Hale hadn't just been captured, he had been remade. And if there was even the slightest chance that the man inside the armor was still human. "We take him," Rourke said. "Alive." Voss turned sharply. "He's a traitor." "He's a prisoner," Rourke countered. "And if we can break whatever hold the Selvok have on him, we might have something more valuable than just another dead enemy." Kane crossed his arms. "You really think he can be saved?" Rourke met his gaze. "We're about to find out." The ironclad drifted in the shadow of a dead planet, its hull dark against the void. The mission was reckless. Boarding the Selvok command ship, taking down General Hale, and extracting him alive. But if they pulled it off, they wouldn't just be striking a blow against the enemy. They'd be proving that the Dominion wasn't just rising. It was coming for vengeance. Rourke stood on the bridge, studying the tactical display. The Selvok command vessel, Voronak, was a floating fortress, bristling with plasma batteries, guarded by a full fleet. A direct assault would be suicide. Voss leaned against the console, arms crossed. "We go in quiet, breach the hull, disable security, and take Hale before they know what's happening." "Getting in isn't the problem," Cole muttered. "Getting out is." Darius Kane stepped forward, pulling up a schematic of the enemy ship. "The Resistance has a solution. We hijack one of their patrol ships, use its clearance codes to slip past the outer defenses." Rourke nodded. "Then let's move. We don't get a second shot at this." The stolen Selvok patrol ship glided through the enemy fleet, its transponder broadcasting an all-clear signal. From the cockpit, Rourke watched the Voronak loom ahead, a jagged behemoth of alien metal. The plan was simple: breach the lower decks, fight their way to Hale, and extract him before the Selvok could respond. Simple, but not easy. The ship docked. The moment the doors hissed open, the squad moved with lethal precision, suppressors muffling their rifles as they cut down the first wave of guards. They advanced through the corridors, past pulsating walls of biometal. The ship felt alive, a twisted fusion of flesh and machine, humming with alien energy. Then the alarms howled. "Damn it," Vex cursed. "They know we're here." "Then we move fast," Rourke said. They reached the command chamber, an immense hall lined with pulsating crimson lights. At the center, shackled in an energy field, stood General Hale, or what was left of him. His once proud Dominion armor had been twisted into something monstrous. Dark biometal fused to his body, his face half replaced with a Selvok combat interface. His eyes burned with artificial rage. But as Rourke stepped forward, something flickered beneath the surface of Hale's gaze. Recognition. "Captain Rourke." Hale's voice was distorted, mechanical. "You shouldn't have come." Rourke lifted his rifle. "You were Dominion once. You don't belong to them." Hale twitched, as if fighting an internal war. His shackles sparked, holding him in place, but the power restraints were failing. Then the chamber doors exploded inward. Selvok warriors flooded the room, weapons raised. Behind them, a towering Selvok warlord stepped forward, its armor adorned with trophies from countless human kills. It pointed at Rourke. "You screaming." The fight for Hale and the Dominion's future had begun. The command chamber erupted into chaos. Plasma fire streaked through the air as the Selvok charged, their war cries shaking the walls. Rourke and his squad scattered, diving for cover behind alien machinery. The warlord stepped forward, towering over the battlefield. "You cannot save him," it bellowed, its deep voice echoing off the metal walls. "He is ours now." Hale remained locked in place, his body twitching as the alien technology inside him struggled against something unseen. Rourke gritted his teeth. "Voss, get to Hale. The rest of you, keep these bastards off us." Voss didn't hesitate. She surged forward, cutting through Selvok warriors with the brutal efficiency of a revenant. Blades clashed, gunfire roared, and for a moment, it was as if the Dominion had never fallen. Rourke fired shot after shot, dropping 2 Excelvok before slamming his rifle butt into a third. Beside him, Cole tossed an ion grenade, the blast sending enemy warriors sprawling. But the warlord wasn't just watching. It moved, faster than anything that size should. In a blink, it was on Rourke, swinging a massive energy blade. He barely dodged, the searing heat grazing his armor. The warlord struck again, forcing Rourke back, then suddenly froze. A mechanical snarl filled the chamber. Hale's restraints had failed. With a thunderous roar, he tore free, his cybernetic arms crushing the remains of the energy field. The Excelvok warriors hesitated. The warlord turned in shock. Then Hale moved. Faster than Rourke had ever seen, he launched himself at the warlord, slamming into it with bone-shattering force. They crashed to the floor in a tangled blur of steel and blood. Hale's mechanical fist smashed into the warlord's face, again and again, until the alien's skull caved in with a sickening crunch. Silence fell. The Excelvok warriors, seeing their leader butchered, hesitated. That was all the Dominion needed. Voss struck first, slicing through an enemy's throat in one swift motion. Kane and his resistance fighters stormed in, gunning down the rest. The battle was over. Hale stood slowly, his breath ragged, his glowing red eyes flickering. He looked at his hands, still slick with alien blood. The machine part of him was still there, still whispering, still pulling him toward the enemy's will. But something stronger pulled him back. Rourke stepped forward, his rifle lowered. "You're still in there, aren't you?" Hale met his gaze. "I was," he rasped, "but not anymore." Voss watched him carefully, then gave a slow nod. "Then we have a war to win." Rourke exhaled, looking at the bodies, the fallen Excelvok, the battle-scarred warriors who had once been thought dead. The Dominion had fallen, but today it had risen again, and the galaxy was about to remember why it should have stayed afraid.